So I lived in Kenya under the Moi regime.
Yeah.
It was really unsafe. I was held hostage in a bank. I was tear gassed. I've been mugged and robbed and had house invasions and all of those sorts of things, and ended up leaving in 2000 because it was at the height of violence. But I sustained 10 years of that. It's been me having to shift my belief system around how we raise children. And when I was back in Australia, I saw a lot of social poverty, a lot of children that are very disengaged with school. We have a very high rate of teen suicide in Australia. And I looked at the current system and saw this isn't working. So with my children, it was then, okay, how will I unlearn what I think I know about education and about parenting and try something different with my kids? My kids have the ultimate choice as to how they want to live their lives.
But they are.
And maybe they know better.
For real.
Maybe they know better. I mean, imagine if your mum had asked you when you were 6 years old, Diana, what do you want to be now?
I don't want to go to school.
Receiving a school certificate is a fundamental human right. And how many children do we know across Kenya who never get that certificate? A lot. Yet the parents will still send the next sibling through the same system that the first sibling still doesn't have a certificate for.
I get your point.
Yeah, and so then what it's about us, we as adults, thinking about where do we get the beliefs that we hold from and why do we have them. And so I haven't done that with my children the way that it's normally done. I've questioned, where have I got those beliefs from? And if you many people who homeschool their kids, if they're asked why do you homeschool, the parent can answer. But if I ask a parent, and don't get me wrong, I've had 2 children who have gone to school throughout, and I'm also a teacher. But if you ask a parent, why do you send your children to school? I've never had one parent that can answer.
Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your girl Diana Lutomia, and for the new subscribers, karibuni sana, and for the returning subscribers, thank you so much for your support. Finally, nimetafuta Mama Amalia. We will get to know her, so make sure you stay tuned. Hi.
Hi, Diana.
Actually, I know you as Susan.
You
Kindly
too.
introduce us.
And I am Susan. I'm both Susan and Mama Amalia.
Oh, Susan and Mama Amalia.
Yeah.
And for the person who is seeing you for the first time, please tell us something more about yourself.
So myself, it's quite a complicated story, but I guess in simplest forms, I'm the mother of 4. My first 2 I adopted as babies from Kenya, and they are now grown up, and both of them live and thrive in Australia. And then I have 2 younger children who I'm here in Kenya with. In addition to that, I'm an educator. I'm a humanitarian. I am an agent of change, and more fundamentally, I'm an artist manager.
And because you have grown up Australia, kindly tell us, how was life growing up in Australia?
So my life growing up was a very, very average middle-class Australian upbringing. I have 1 brother, a mother and father who stayed together, lived in a middle-class neighbourhood, had a very beautiful middle-class life. And when I finished university, I studied teaching at university, and as soon as I finished university, I moved to Kenya.
So what is your profession now?
That's a good question. So my whole career, I've been an educator. I've taught all over the world. I've lived in many, many different countries. My kids were born in Qatar in the Middle East. So I've been a teacher, I've been a school principal, worked as an educational consultant, and that has been my career. And then most recently I've transitioned into, I created my own not-for-profit, which comprised of building 2 schools here in Kenya in resource poor communities, one in Korogocho and one in Kiserian. And working in a field of artist management. I guess the most important thing to sort of summarize all of that is I actually believe that Kenya holds the answer to many of the world's problems.
Okay.
So I'm here and raising my children here to activate that light and to show the world the power that Kenya holds.
And at what point did you decide you want to relocate to Kenya?
So as I mentioned, I've lived in many countries. So I lived in Kenya for the whole of the 90s.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I lived in Malaysia and in Rwanda and in Qatar. And then after 25 years abroad, I moved back to Australia 5 years ago and decided it wasn't for me and decided it wasn't where I wanted to raise my children. So the children and I moved back here in January of 2023 because I wanted them to be exposed to an African value system and I wanted them to love Kenya.
Kenya is a great country.
It is.
And did you experience any culture shock?
Coming here?
Yeah.
I mean, there's always culture shock. I've lived in many countries, so I actually know, and I have a master's degree in cross-cultural understanding, so I've really done a lot of work around culture and the values of culture. So, you know, I've lived in Arabic countries, I've lived in Asian countries, and I've lived in African countries and Western, and actually the greatest culture shock is going back to Australia. So, which is called reverse culture shock. So when you go back into your where you come from, but you don't fit in. And I really don't fit in.
Definitely, when you come in Kenya, you have to fit in.
Yeah, exactly.
And share with us about your transition to management.
To artist management?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd come from working in school management for a lot of my career, and artist management actually happened by mistake. I was here in 2022 as part of my educational development, and I saw an artist perform. I've seen artists perform in Kenya my whole life, and I'm a huge fan of Kenyan artistry and a massive sound to soul junkie. But even way back to the days of before you were born with Eric Wainaina, Five Alive, you know, so it's all been part of my existence for a very long time. And I was here on holiday and I saw a man by the name of Ambassa Mandela, who used to be the lead singer of a band called Sarabi, perform at The Alchemist. And after that I messaged him and I said, I think we need to get you onto a world stage. So that was how I became part of more of the artist management scene in Nairobi, and very much trying to create a value that artists can have and that the system here can have around artistry and how to build sustainable models around that.
And you have said that you came in Kenya at the 90s. So tell us, how was life then and life now? What has changed?
Well, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Kenya, and I think many Kenyans don't recognise that. So I lived in Kenya under the Moi regime. It was really unsafe. I was held hostage in a bank. I was tear gassed. I've been mugged and robbed and had house invasions and all of those sorts of things, and ended up leaving in 2000 because it was at the height of violence. But I sustained 10 years of that. And now you look at the transformation that Kenya has created. I believe that Kenya is a brand incubator for the world. Kenya has invented systems like M-Pesa. It's streamlined, and there has been so much development that many Kenyans don't recognise.
That's true.
Much more development than has been in Australia in the last 30 years.
And when you first came to Kenya, did you come as a tourist?
No, I actually came as a supervisor on a teenage exchange program where we had 30 Australian teenagers living with families in Nairobi and Mombasa. and I was one of the supervisors on that program. And at the moment I landed here, I knew I never wanted to leave.
Okay, that's nice. That's so great. At least now as Kenyans we are growing. And now talking about management, let's talk about Amalia.
Sure.
Amalia is a young girl and she's a brand on herself. How does that make you feel like a mother? As a mother?
So the thing about Amalia and all of my children, it's been me having to shift my belief system around how we raise children. And when I was back in Australia, I saw a lot of social poverty, a lot of children that are very disengaged with school. We have a very high rate of teen suicide in Australia. And I looked at the current system and saw this isn't working. So with my children, it was then, okay, how will I unlearn what I think I know about education and about parenting and try something different with my kids? So my kids have the ultimate choice as to how they want to live their lives.
But they are.
And maybe they know better.
For real.
Maybe they know better. I mean, imagine if your mum had asked you when you were 6 years old, Diana, what do you want to be now?
I don't want to go to school. Maybe I want to do business. I could have said that.
Yeah. Yeah, and Amalia and I were having that conversation just this morning because Amalia has a choice. She can either operate her life through a model of entrepreneurship or she can go to school. It's up to her. But she has to choose one. So there's still boundaries around what the children do, but they have a lot of autonomy. I actually believe that the children are our teachers. So if we're guided by them, we have the power to change the world. So I'm very proud of Amalia, and you know, when she was being interviewed by you, she really knows how to hold her own.
Yeah, true.
She spoke recently at a global conference on the environment and sustainability in front of hundreds of people from all over the world.
I love that courage.
Yeah, and she has her own podcast which is called Oh My Kenya. She works with some big influencers here in Kenya, and it's really about teaching our children that when they stand in their truth, they'll live in peace.
Yeah.
And I don't need to control them.
But I feel in Kenya, because I've grown in Kenya, I feel like our parents did have the mentality that you have.
Don't worry, even in Australia, people don't have this mentality. They don't. It's just me. So receiving a school certificate is a fundamental human right. And how many children do we know across Kenya who never get that certificate? A lot. Yet the parents will still send the next sibling through the same system that the first sibling still doesn't have a certificate for.
I get your point.
Yeah, and so then what it's about us, we as adults, thinking about where do we get the beliefs that we hold from and why do we have them. And so I haven't done that with my children the way that it's normally done. I've questioned, where have I got those beliefs from? And if you many people who homeschool their kids, if they're asked why do you homeschool, the parent can answer. But if I ask and don't get me wrong, I've had 2 children who have gone to school throughout, and I'm also a teacher. But if you ask a parent, why do you send your children to school? I've never had one parent that can answer.
Yeah, true.
They just say, because that's what we do.
It's a system.
It's a system, but it's a system that's actually failing.
Yeah, true. Because I think like we have been, most of us, we grew up knowing like you need to grow up, you need to be a teacher, you need to be dreaming of those professional jobs. Like you can't think of something, and maybe if you want to be a dancer, you can't tell your parents you want to be a dancer. He'll be like, that's wasting school fees. And then I think like nowadays, the world is evolving. I think people are starting to embrace that culture of like, you can do what you want. I can nurture your talent, and you can be a good person from that something?
Yeah, because right now, even in Nairobi, people are earning more from dancing on TikTok than being a teacher.
Very true. Very true. And then you can find, like, we have people, because I've seen people on the street, people have certificates, people have first class, but they're still begging for jobs. Just because maybe someone knows someone who was employed instead of that person being there, someone else was given that opportunity.
And the jobs that you're going to earn, you know, if you're earning a salary of 30K as a graduate, you're poor.
With this
you're poor. You're living in poverty. Yeah, you're living in poverty. So again, it comes back to we as parents really identifying what do we want at the end game for our children. Yeah, and so Amalia is not my only entrepreneurial child. I have two others. But what is the end game? And the end game is, for me, the end game for my children is that they have the capacity to be kind. That was it. So I didn't care if they didn't know how to read or write or do maths or do physics, because a machine can do all of those things for us nowadays. But a machine can never be kind. So for me, it was about how am I going to raise my children with that innate capacity for them to be kind, kind to themselves and kind to others. Because everything else, Amalia, you've just heard her. Amalia has never been taught how to read. But she knows how to read. Yeah. She knows how to read. Children learn despite us.
They learn very fast.
Yes, and even for us, if we think about what we learnt at school, how much of that do we actually use? Yeah, I mean, at school, do they teach us how to be a YouTuber? No. Do they teach us how to be a graphic designer? No. But these are the skills when you're working in an artist space. This is what people need. And they're not being taught that.
And how is the experience working with the underprivileged people from Kenya?
So working with people in... I actually believe that one of the reasons why I love Kenya is because I believe that if we unite resource rich and resource poor, we can change everything. So I don't believe that there is rich and poor. I actually believe that there's resource rich and there's resource poor. So let me break it down really fundamentally. If you're a girl living in Korogocho and you don't have access to a sanitary pad, and you're a girl in Australia who has access to everything, yet that girl in Australia is the one who is potentially going to commit suicide, then this one here in Korogocho is the teacher. Yeah? The teacher of perseverance, of resilience, of patience, of waiting, of being, of surrendering. That person is the teacher. This one at this end is struggling. This person at this end is actually struggling more, because this one in Korogocho, she'll be menstruating for 7 days and then she'll get back on to her life. But this one here, she potentially doesn't even have a life.
Tell us some of the projects that you're running in Kenya.
So the initial program that we started was building 2 schools. And the project came about as a result of me living in Australia with the children and deciding, you know, Australia is a very consumer culture. And I don't believe that consuming is necessarily the best way to raise children. So I took the idea of raising my children as contributors. So we received an inheritance from my auntie who passed away and invested it into building 2 schools here in Kenya. So the external infrastructure of our schools is very basic, just mabati, but internal, it's better than some of the international schools. So we resourced the schools and we had, I'm talking in past tense because we have recently given the schools back to the communities to run and operate as they see fit. But we have traditional dance, drumming, poetry, drama. We had a book publishing program, many different programs that were all based around the idea of contribution, and they served as a platform for my children to create their business models with an understanding of contribution. So my children actually paid for the programs to be run within the schools.
Okay.
And Amalia's father is from Korogocho. So that's the land that we had there in Korogocho. Her grandmother used to run a school on it. So it was honouring her roots and her foundations, because she doesn't have anything to do with her father.
Yeah.
But really still valuing that as part of who she is.
Okay, that's nice. And you have said you have kids who are in school and some who are doing business. When the schools are closed, because of course we have this work who are in school, how do you balance them? How do you put them together so that they don't scold one another? Like, probably I'm in school, you're not in school.
Well, no, my kids have very big age gaps.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but even with that, it comes back to actually the culture of kindness. So we really embed that culture of kindness in how we operate within our family. But there's a very big age gap. So my oldest two are actually at university.
Okay.
So both of my older two I adopted as babies. The first one was 2 months old. Now she's 26. And the second one was 6 months old from Missions of Charity in Huruma. And she's now 20. So they've both gone through mainstream school system. They've been educated all over the world. And one of them works and one of them is at university in Australia.
Kindly tell us some of your social where people can find you.
So probably the most valuable for this conversation is my organisation is called Into Ed Africa, which is in and then the number 2, Into Ed _Africa on Instagram, and my artist management page is Snap _artist management KE.
So you're the person who's running your kids' page?
Yes, I also run my kids' pages. So Amalia is Amalia _Malaika, and Marley, who we will talk about another time, is 99% Marley _kidpreneur.
Okay, that's great.
Also, there's this thing that you're doing with the gadgets for education. Don't talk about that.
Oh my God, maybe that should be separate, but we can.
Or it should be on a separate.
Oh, it's a.
We'll talk a lot.
Oh, it's okay. Maybe we can come next.
Yeah, actually, you could do that one. You could do that one just as an episode on those gadgets.
Oh.
Yeah.
Then we can plan next time. Okay, let me close it up.
She's learned so much. It's like.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, make sure you like this video, share and comment. Peace.